Ukrainian drone strikes, a devastating blow to Russia's war economy. Drone attacks have become a daily threat. The Ukrainian army has tested multiple strategies to counter the Russian invasion. Artillery strikes, surprise raids, and special operations were among them. Yet none have matched the impact of Ukraine's drones. Kyiv has redefined its military tactics based on drone capabilities. The focus has shifted to targeting Russia's energy infrastructure. Oil and gas facilities, crucial to Russia's economy, have become primary targets. Ukraine understood that Russia's income from energy exports fueled its war efforts. In 2024, Russia's oil and gas revenues surged by 26% to $18 billion. However, relentless Ukrainian drone strikes have significantly reduced these earnings. Recently, Ukraine launched another major drone attack. This strike rattled Russia's financial stability and disrupted energy production. Even President Vladimir Putin did not anticipate such a bold move. The target was one of Russia's largest and most profitable energy facilities. We will now examine the attack, its consequences, and how such strikes weaken Russia's war economy. Massive drone strikes on Russian oil infrastructure. Russia reported that its air defense forces intercepted and destroyed 70 Ukrainian drones. These attacks spanned several regions, including Volgograd, Astrakhan, Belgorod, Kursk, and Voronezh. However, the primary focus was the strategic assault on Astrakhan. In just 3 days, Ukrainian long-range drones struck one of Russia's largest oil refineries for the second time. According to Kyiv officials, the targeted facility was located in Astrakhan Oblast. Ukraine's security service confirmed that the refinery, one of Russia's top 10, processes about 6% of the nation's oil. The attack specifically hit one of Gazprom's largest plants in the region. This facility processes up to 12 billion cubic meters of gas annually, producing gasoline, sulfur, and other essential energy products. Its strategic role in Russia's gas industry made it a key target. The drone strike caused massive explosions and raging fires. Reports indicate that large quantities of petroleum products ignited. The Astrakhan gas processing plant, a major producer of gasoline and diesel, was forced to halt operations. Ukrainian sources claim that production at the plant had already been suspended before the attack. Employees were allegedly moved to shelters before the strike. The aftermath and Russia's response. Following the attack, Astrakhan Governor Igor Babushkin visited the damaged facility. Russian state media reported that the shutdown was routine and there was no threat to staff. However, these statements sparked speculation that Russia had prior intelligence about the attack. Despite official reassurances, the damage was severe. Russian media confirmed that the fire had been extinguished, but assessments of the destruction are ongoing. A clearer report on the extent of the damage is expected in the coming days. This latest strike underscores Ukraine's ongoing campaign against Russia's energy sector. For 3 years, Ukraine has systematically targeted Russian oil refineries, gas plants, and other key facilities. These attacks continue to weaken Russia's ability to fund its war efforts, shifting the balance of economic power on the battlefield. As winter tightens its grip, Russia is sinking into cold and darkness. The country, once an energy giant, now faces a severe crisis. With approximately 30 major oil refineries and numerous smaller facilities producing 530 million tons of oil annually, Russia once thrived on its energy sector. However, relentless Ukrainian attacks have crippled production. The nation is now shrouded in darkness, while the Kremlin remains warm, untouched by the suffering of its citizens. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky announced that Ukraine had struck over 30 Russian oil refineries by late 2024. Since then, the number of attacks has surpassed 70, with drones reaching a range of 1,500 kilometers. These strikes are not only disrupting the Russian military, but also dismantling Moscow's economy. Oil exports have plummeted by a third, and since June, Ukraine has reduced Russian oil refinery volumes by 14%. With record low temperatures approaching, Putin faces mounting challenges. The country's electrical infrastructure, already in decline, is crumbling under economic strain. Soviet-era transformers, wires, and power lines remain unchanged. Their deterioration worsened by Western sanctions. Even in Moscow and St. Petersburg, the outdated energy grid is evident. Russia's war expenditures are draining resources needed to repair its failing infrastructure. Oil revenues continue to dwindle, exacerbating the crisis. As the war drags on, the collapse of Russia's energy sector accelerates. The destruction of oil and gas facilities, combined with Western sanctions, paints a bleak future. The likelihood of Russia turning into a frozen wasteland this winter is increasing. Putin must now decide, will he continue funding the war, or will he prioritize his people's survival? Frustration is mounting among Russian citizens. In recent weeks, widespread heating cuts have left millions shivering. Residents are calling on local authorities to restore warmth to their homes. Putin, already blamed for the energy collapse, is now the target of growing public resentment. Many believe he scapegoats officials, while the true problem lies with his leadership. Anti-war Russians see the energy crisis as the inevitable consequence of decades of corruption and mismanagement. Even pro-Kremlin newspapers acknowledge the severity of the situation. Russia's municipal infrastructure decay exceeded 70% in 2022 and is now estimated at nearly 80%. Sergei Ponomarev, chairman of the State Duma Committee on Construction, Housing, and Utilities, admitted that until recently, some areas still used 90-year-old water pipes. In the Siberian Republic of Khakassia, 2 villages were left without electricity last month due to infrastructure failures. In 2020, a burst pipe in the Perm region resulted in 5 deaths. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov has acknowledged the crisis, attributing it to the inadequacy of municipal infrastructure. He admitted that modernizing the entire system could take 10 to 15 years, if not longer. For Russians enduring harsh winter conditions, this is not a reassuring prospect. The energy crisis deepens as Russia's exports decline. The remaining reserves are insufficient to sustain both the war effort and domestic needs. Citizens are left to suffer, abandoned in the cold, while Putin clings to his ambitions. Russia's descent into darkness is no longer just a metaphor. It is a chilling reality. Since 2019, Russia has suffered a deep economic wound. In 2020, its oil and gas revenues reached $219 billion. These 2 sectors made up 60% of Russia's exports and 40% of its federal budget. Putin tried to flex Russia's energy power by cutting gas exports to Europe and raising prices. By selling oil and gas globally, Russia earned between $500 million and $1 billion daily, funding its war against Ukraine. But when the war took a drastic turn, Russia's energy exports collapsed. Not only did Russia lose its market share, but BP, Shell, ExxonMobil, and Equinor also scaled down operations in the country. Putin had miscalculated. Another blow came from Saudi Arabia. Prince Mohammed bin Salman rejected an invitation to the BRICS summit in Kazan. The Kremlin had labeled the event as the most important foreign policy moment in Russia's history. Instead of attending, the Saudi prince sent his foreign minister. Putin's assistant for international affairs, Yuri Ushakov, avoided commenting on this snub. He claimed Western countries were pressuring Russia's partners against attending. Despite not imposing sanctions on Russia, Saudi Arabia remained cautious. The kingdom had reduced oil production by 2 million barrels per day to maintain prices. But by 2024, Riyadh's stance began to shift. Concerned about losing market share, Saudi Arabia threatened to increase production, potentially driving prices down. This move could severely impact Russia's ability to finance its war in 2025. Russia already sells its oil at discounted rates with high production costs. A drop in global prices could worsen its economic strain. The history between Russia and Saudi Arabia adds to the uncertainty. At the start of the COVID-19 pandemic, Russia triggered a price war by boosting production. Saudi Arabia retaliated, causing oil prices to plummet. Eventually, both sides agreed to supply cuts to stabilize the market. Now the stakes are much higher. Russia faces crushing sanctions and an expensive, prolonged war. The energy market is shifting. If Saudi Arabia increases oil supply while demand falls, Russia's financial stability could unravel. The coming months will test Moscow's resilience like never before. Mounting pressure on Russia's strategic choices. Global oil market trends are forcing Russia into a difficult position. The International Energy Agency predicts that by 2030, global supply capacity will exceed demand by approximately 8 million barrels per day. This shift creates a significant challenge for Russia, as oil has been a pillar of its economy for years. Iran and the Gulf states, in contrast, are better positioned to handle declining oil prices. Their oil wells are closer to the surface, making extraction far more cost-efficient. New drilling projects in these regions also require significantly lower equilibrium prices compared to Russia. This puts Russia at a severe disadvantage against its international competitors. Russia's deep dependence on oil revenues. Since 2014, oil has accounted for 30% to 50% of Russia's annual state budget revenue. The country has essentially tied its financial stability to energy resources. The Kremlin has used these oil revenues not only to sustain its economy, but also to fund military operations, particularly in Ukraine. However, global market fluctuations are now eroding this financial strategy, leaving the Russian war economy increasingly vulnerable. Although Russia has not published trade data since its full-scale invasion of Ukraine, expert estimates suggest that fossil fuel sales continue to finance its budget deficit. The Kremlin still relies on these revenues to fund both its military operations and the country's basic needs. However, maintaining the flow of oil rents is becoming a growing challenge. Sanctions and the decline of Gazprom. Western sanctions have further weakened Russia's energy sector, with Gazprom being the hardest hit. The state-controlled energy giant, which holds the world's largest natural gas reserves, reported a net loss of approximately $7 billion in 2023. This sharp decline followed a drastic reduction in European sales due to deteriorating relations with the West. Gazprom has responded by selling off assets in an attempt to offset its losses. The company has put 14 hotels and resorts up for sale, including the Marriott Sador in Armenia. It had already listed several properties, such as the Imperial Park Hotel and Spa in the Moscow region. However, even with these sales, Gazprom's financial troubles remain severe. The Imperial Hotel alone is valued at $69.5 million, far from enough to compensate for its massive losses. Looming gas market crisis. Another major blow awaits Gazprom. Ukraine has announced that it does not intend to renew its gas transit agreement with Russia when it expires at the end of the year. If this deal is not extended, Russia could lose a key route for delivering gas to European markets, compounding its economic difficulties. Putin's gamble and the future of Russia's energy sector. Vladimir Putin's decisions have not only burdened his people, but also destabilized Russia's largest energy companies. His insistence on war has left many Russian citizens struggling under the weight of economic decline. While the Kremlin pushes forward with its aggressive strategies, many anti-war Russians are also suffering the consequences. Analysts believe that Putin aims to compensate for Russia's military and economic losses by seizing Ukraine's resources. However, this approach is both unethical and unsustainable. Further escalation could provoke Ukrainian strikes on Russian energy facilities, potentially plunging the country into darkness. As long as Putin remains committed to war, Russia will continue to face economic instability and energy insecurity. The question remains, how long can the Kremlin sustain this fragile system before it collapses under its own weight?